He's on his way.
We're just waiting on the finance commissioner, so everybody knows. He's on his way, so. Right. Everybody ready?
Let's just make sure we're on you.
Yep.
Streaming?
Yeah, we're streaming. We're ready? Okay, great. Welcome to this special meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. This meeting was called for a single purpose of reviewing the City of Buffalo's proposed bond anticipation note sale. As is customary, we will open the meeting to public comments on this single matter discussed today at the conclusion of the meeting. Any individual watching today may submit a request to speak during the meeting to our email address at info@dfsa.ny.gov. This email account will be monitored during the meeting, and all information will be sent back to you on how to join. How to access to the public commentary period is also posted to our website on the board meeting page. Before we begin, I'll request that Executive Director Rowe take the roll.
Okay, Secretary Floss.
Here.
Director Sanfilippo.
Here.
Mayor Scanlon.
Present.
County Executive Poloncarz.
Present.
Director Hove.
Here.
And Director Keenan.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The City of Buffalo is proposing a bond anticipation note, which is scheduled to occur September 18th, 2025, with the closing on September 30th. The meeting materials, including the staff report on this matter, was previously provided to you in your board packet. A copy of the recent S&P rating report has also been provided for you today. We have representatives from the City of Buffalo's Controller's Office present for any questions you may have for that office. Additionally, our financial advisor, Mr. Whitney Warren, is remotely present for questions as they arise. At this time, I'll ask Director Rowe to discuss this item with us.
Thank you. Nathan, if you could pull up the presentation. Are you able to maximize it? Okay. So just to begin, as Fred mentioned, this sale is scheduled to occur on September 18th. That is one day after the Federal Reserve makes their interest rate statement on the 17th. There is a provision in the notice of sale that would allow for the sale to be revoked if for some reason the market was to go haywire after that announcement. So there is a safety provision included. So because we reviewed this capital plan so long ago, I have a couple slides just to refresh everybody's memory and for the new directors on where we left off with the capital plan. So BFSA reviewed the 2025 capital plan and the 26-29 capital improvement program at its meeting on December 11th, 2024. The 2024 capital plan consisted of 3 different buckets or components within the plan. The first is the annual City of Buffalo budgeted request. This is the normal routine request that the mayor presents annually, and that was in the amount of $27.2 million. The Buffalo City School District amount was $55.5 million. And then there was a third bucket, which was a request for short-term borrowing to fund city projects that are reimbursable through state and federal resources. And that amount was $26.8 million.
I think we need to stop for a second so people can see. Did you try to share that?
It is shared.
It is shared. I'm just worried that nobody's going to see any of the slides.
Well, it looks like on YouTube that it is.
It's fully there?
Slide, it's just not on the screen to go down.
Does anybody not have the slides in front of them?
So
Okay.
so this is Hogs. I see it, but it looks like it's on the first page, and it's kind of small. I don't know if it could be expanded.
Okay. It's not working, so I'll need to advance it and.
You just advanced it, but it's still not.
Yep, it advanced.
Okay.
But it's still small on your screen?
It is.
Yes.
Viewing it through Zoom, whereas on YouTube it's full screen.
Okay. All right.
I'll try to share this.
Okay, why don't we, are you okay with that, Tim? Can you read it?
I have my packet. So I'm sorry.
Okay, then I think we're fine.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that
Very cool.
everybody can see what we're going through.
Tim, I did email the slides to you earlier, so it might be easier to go in your email and see them.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. So if we could go to slide 3, please.
This is for.
Slide number 3, district component, $55.5 million. Thank you. Okay, so of the district component, that's $55.5 million. Since 2012, the district has used refunding savings from its joint school construction board funds to fund its capital program fully. So it was just under $134 million since 2012 that's been used for capital needs for the school district. The amount was originally $55.5 million in the capital plan that was approved by council back in December. That was downsized. The request for financing was downsized since then to $22 million, as some projects weren't at the point where they could draft a bond resolution for it yet. So that was a specific mechanism to move it from $55.5 million down to $22 million. 97% of those projects, the 22 million projects, are reimbursable by New York State building aid. Those approvals from New York State have been received and are in hand. With respect to the city's short-term borrowing request of $26.8 million, the request is specifically to provide cash needs for project costs that are reimbursable. So the city has to front the cash to pay for the project, and then they submit for reimbursement. Timing of reimbursement is unclear. There's no direct schedule for that. That's at no fault of the city, I should mention that. They just don't know when the federal government's going to reimburse.
Have they had any recent contact with the federal government relative to reimbursement?
Right. I'm not anything recent within the last month or so now.
But is this guaranteed?
Last we were aware of, yes, absolutely. But
Yeah,
we don't find it, so
that's big. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, the total project cost for the third bucket of short-term cash borrowing is $204 million. is what the total project cost will be estimated at. Next slide, please.
I have it.
And Steve Carno to see if that's the right slide.
That's slide number 4 now, 5.
Or should start with 2025.
Okay, 2025,
There it is.
slide 6, number of the corner.
Okay.
Slide 6?
No, we're on slide 4, he's on slide 6.
So the, moving forward, that's where we left off in December. Now going forward to February, there's a minor amendment that was made to the capital budget. The amendment affected only the city's normal recurring routine capital budget, so it wasn't the district or that third bucket for the cash borrowing. It took individual council district allocations, so each of the 9 council districts, they received anywhere in this original allocation between $200,000 and $500,000. They took it out of a separate allocation for each council district and put it into a citywide infrastructure line. The second amendment was that there was a new project added in the amount of $100,000 for the King Urban Life Center. The total amount of the capital budget remained unchanged. This processed the bond resolutions that were submitted to council later that month in February. Advancing the right way. I'll have you click the slides, Nathan, after this. So from a historical perspective, from 2004 to 2007, BFSA issued debt on behalf of the city. Beginning in 2008, in contemplation of transitioning from a control period to an advisory period, the city of Buffalo recommenced borrowing on behalf of the city and the school district. That was one of the triggering requirements for BFSA to go from a control into an advisory period. And since 2012, when we officially transitioned into an advisory period, the city has continued to annually finance its capital program. This sale typically occurs in spring, and specifically late April is where we typically see the bond sale. Next slide. The bond ratings, there's one that was handed out to you today. That was a recent bond rating that was received in the standstill. The city is rated by Fitch A+, and a high that was made by the rating agencies. So Fitch revised their rating a month ago from stable to negative, but the rating A+ remains the same. These last affirmed their rating in 2024, and it remains at A1 stable. S&P also just revised their outlook from stable to negative, but A+ remains the same. And they rated the band the highest rating that a band can receive, which is the SP1+ rating. Next slide, please.
Yeah, is there a reason S&P doesn't rank BFSA?
Correct. I wasn't here back when we were issuing debt, so I don't know why they were excluded, but since we haven't sold that, we haven't asked for a rating. So we've heard a lot about the city controller's recommended debt limit. There's a little bit of a crossover in years since we're meeting in September, so I want to just provide you the most up-to-date info. Controller's debt limit, recommended debt limit for the 2025 capital sale is $28 million, and that is, you've heard that amount discussed with the debate that's going on now regarding selling of bonds. Now, on August 1st, 2025, the controller did issue their recommendations for the next 5 years, and that's what's on here, is the 2026 year, 28 million. It increases to 29 million for 2027 and 28. 2029 is 34, and 2030 is 36 million.
Jeanette, do we know what process was used to come up with these numbers?
If I could defer that question to Greg Samansky, that would be probably helpful for him to cue in on that.
Or Mr. Gansey too.
So, I mean, we use the capital debt policy that was approved, I think, in 2018. And, I mean, we've used it for the, you know, last 7 years probably. So, I mean, we're just kind of following those same mechanisms. I think it's outlined in the estimate and report. Some of the ratios that we use for how much we're going to issue. And I think the goal is, you know, to gradually increase it as time goes on, as the general fund budget also increases. Not sure if that really answers the question, but I mean, I don't have the actual policy or the estimate report in front of me.
Okay. So just to be clear, is you have a number of ratios that you use as a percentage of the city budget, and that's how you basically determine how much you believe the debt limit should be. Is that right?
I think so. I mean, and I think we also look at, you know, what was paid in the past, and, you know, if it goes up too much, you know, that puts a strain on the general fund budget also. You know, when we did the settlement bond, I mean, that was an extra $10 million that we had to take into an account. So that kind of factors into it too.
Okay.
And when you think of the settlement bond, it's more far as the case for the police settlement, $43 million. I think as we stated on numerous occasions, this is analysis that we do, we perform to be fiscally responsible. What can the city absorb? As Greg has stated on numerous occasions, it's like we try to match up how much debt we pay in the upcoming year compared to how much that payment, how much additional debt we can take on. So this is a drawn out analysis that Greg and his team do in order to determine what the debt cap should be for the upcoming year.
Delano, have you done a comparative analysis with other cities of our size, either in New York or in other states?
I haven't done specifically what other cities are issuing.
But one thing we can say when we look at other cities is that they provide way more information than City Buffalo provide in regards to debt and then forecasting out projects that they plan on working on. So we can compare and look. I know from a financial standpoint, we have looked at other cities as far as debt. I don't know how much of a comparison we've done, but that's something that we can take back to the comptroller and see if that's something we want to do.
If I may add some perspective on this policy.
Yep.
It goes back decades. It isn't something that was just developed over 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years. The policy was we needed to amortize or pay down our bonded indebtedness more than what we issue in order to shrink the size that was outstanding. So this isn't like something new. This was predicated after the city of Buffalo lost its credit rating back in the late 70s. And in order to reestablish our credit rating with the rating agencies, they had to pay down more debt, amortize more debt than what we were issuing. So this isn't something that's relatively new under this comptroller or myself or the controllers. It was before I took over. So I want at least the people in this room to understand that this isn't some fly-by-night, let's just throw numbers out of the air. We're trying to shrink the amount of outstanding bonded indebtedness that has been developing over decades. So this way, there's some perspective, you know, as to why there's such a restriction on the size of these capital budgets.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how are these numbers impacted by the availability of federal or state grants that would reimburse them?
On the number, the list, so.
Yeah, when you increase from 28 to 29 or 29 to 34 million.
I think there was a caveat in the estimate report that if there was reimbursable projects, we would consider going above those numbers, you know, and that's, you know, and that's why we're adding those other projects in there that are reimbursable.
And
So,
then sorry, Greg.
so that's why, you know, that was put in there, so there would be some flexibility to do that. You know, going forward, if there is a reimbursable, you know, proof of reimbursement and things of that nature.
Has that exception been applied to the current year?
Well,
We talked earlier about three pieces in this $110 million, of which 26.8 is reimbursable, but this band is only financing 7.4 million of it.
To answer your question, yes, because the band that the comptroller submitted was for $29 million. The cap was $28 million. Initially, the cap was 28. The administration came and said they had $7 million in federal reimbursement. So she went from 28 and add on additional 7. So that's $35 million based off the information received that you had $7 million reimbursable by the federal government. So it's an analysis with Greg and his team to do. Comptroller is open to having a discussion if that cap needs to be increased or decreased at the end of the day. But right now, initially for calendar year 25, the band was going to be sold. The bond was going to initially be sold. The cap was $28 million. We had the 28, then we had an additional $7 million because we had information about reimbursement, $22 million from the Board of Education reimbursement from New York State, and an additional $7 million from federal government. Those three projects.
Do you want to continue your presentation, or should I continue my questioning on this?
Well, and Jim has questions too, so why don't you go ahead and continue your questions, and then we'll.
Maybe I don't understand, but the amount that was included as reimbursable was 26.8 million. The ban only includes 3 of 21 projects, the total 7.4 million. How were those 3 projects picked out of the 21? Are the others not yet ready to go?
It was not ready to go. So it was a request, the administration, I think, initially for the federal project, request around. It would submit paperwork to Greg and his team so they can review, send that paperwork to bond counsel, so bond counsel can review and draft a resolution. You know, those resolutions to the county council, so that's $7 million. The same thing holds true with the Board of Education. At the time that we requested documentation for the information that they had, they were able to submit paperwork up to $22 million. We were able to get $22 million worth of projects and resolutions drafted, submitted to the council, and approved. That 22 and that 7, the 29 million that we went to the market for to request a ban.
So there's 22 million of the 26, or whatever the math is, 21 million is not yet ready to go.
I think the deadline to submit the information for the bond resolution was like January 6th, I think it was. So at that point in time, the deadline wasn't passed. The deadline passed, and not enough information at that time was submitted. But there were bond resolutions drafted for about $57 million worth of projects. So there's a delta between the $29 million ban and the bond resolutions of up to $57 million, which a large portion of that wasn't, we're not going to the market for on the 18th, was that original $28 million capital budget that included primarily City of Buffalo projects. So that's where the debate is. So most of these that would be going to the market for, or pretty much all of them, are the reimbursable side of it, but then there's also just the core capital budget side that we would have borrowed for year after year. That's where the discrepancy is on the lack of borrowing.
If I can get these numbers correct, Board of Ed at $55.5 million, only $22 million is ready to go, and that's all that's included in the ban. The reimbursable piece had $26.8 million, and only $7.4 million of it is ready to go.
Yeah, and some of those were really high dollar projects. So it's not like there were a large quantity of projects that amounted to that gap. Some, you know, were
So,
yeah.
so the Board of Ed is happy and okay with the $22 million for now, because that's all that's ready to go. The city is satisfied and happy that 7.4 of the 26.8 in capital reimbursable projects are ready to go, and they're included in the ban.
I wouldn't say the city is satisfied.
Would
No.
the city want any more of the $26.8 million in reimbursable items issued now?
Yes, but there is information that was required. I don't have the details on the specifics. I know one project, I don't know if we get into the specific project, but there was some very specific pieces of information that were being requested, and at the time was not satisfactory for the controller's office. So we
couldn't draft a resolution based off the.
based on it, exactly.
So we don't have all the paperwork to submit to bond council to draft a resolution. We can't.
Okay, let's for the moment say that only 7.4 of the 26.8 is ready to go.
Right.
Right. So then you have a third piece that is 27.2, the ordinary capital projects.
Right. Bond resolutions were drafted.
How many of those, or how much of that is ready to go in projects?
My understanding that all, if not the vast majority of those projects were ready and had bond resolutions drafted, but
And none of those are reimbursable anyway.
those weren't reimbursable. But I mean, if we're talking in totality of the controller's cap, that 29 million that's going to the market, but that's largely reimbursable projects. So it's not like the total risk is 57 million. It's closer to that $28 million number once the reimbursement.
So none of the $27.2 million in the capital project, even though a lot of it, you said, is ready to go, is included.
No, in the current ban sale, no, none of those were.
Out of that $28 million, but just to make sure we make clear that this is why the controller is acting for a priority list. Because even though the cap was set at 28, she increased it by another 7.35, we went to market with $29, $6 million left. Controller didn't want to pick out of that $28 million, what project she was going to go to the market for. That's why she reached out to administration on numerous occasions to have a sit down to discuss how we move forward.
So why would any of that not come under the cap of the 28 million?
Because the cap
These
is,
other two are reimbursable.
they reimbursable. Anything can happen with the state government or federal government. We went to the market because we had documentation. As everyone knows, anything can occur. The cap was $28 million. Rather, and then if you look at the language of the estimate report, it says she may increase the cap if you have a reimbursement. It doesn't say she will.
I understand what you're
Okay, I guess, Jim, you've been waiting. If you have one thing to say, go
I
ahead.
just wanted a point of clarity to where Greg said that in the comptroller estimate report, aidable projects would be excluded from the cap. We proved early on that all of our projects were aidable, and we made numerous requests to be excluded from the cap and were denied.
Jeanette, would you like to go?
Why?
Or do you have?
I'm just picking up on what you said, they were denied even though they were reimbursable.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the one project, the Buff State project, there was no,
No, Greg, the Buff State project is not on. We're talking about the $22 million that's included in the current proposal. Those, we made requests to have those excluded from the cap numerous times. And it was denied, just for record of fact.
Thank you.
So,
Shall I continue or?
please continue.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to
Okay, go ahead.
make an observation. I mean, obviously, some thoughts that I have relative to the Board of Ed and its capital budget. You know, at June 30th, 2024, they had a fund balance of $424 million. As of also 6/30/24, they had $177 million in unassigned fund balance. I said, to me, if New York State Building Aid is gonna reimburse at 97%, why should the city even issue bonds for those projects and taxpayers paying the debt service on bonds until they're reimbursed? I said, to me, you could take the city's $28 million, subtract this from the bond sale, and have the city add their $28 million in unreimbursable projects into the bond sale and let the school district pay for that out of their fund balance. They got $177 million. They want to sell 22 million. I say take that out of your unassigned fund balance and transfer the ability for the city to undertake those bonds under the regular capital project program. I mean, the Board of Ed's still going to get their 97% reimbursement. You'll be able to go to the bond sale. We could get rid of this lawsuit if that would assist then in expanding the size of the borrowing for city projects, including the reimbursable ones. So, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. There's $177 million of unassigned fund balance with the school district. Why don't they take 23 million out of their fund balance and then do those projects on their own? You know, I could be overstepping my boundaries here, but it seems to me that would settle a lot of the discussion relative to the administration and the controller getting under the size of your cap. You guys getting the projects that you want, and then you guys do it under your unassigned fund balance, and everybody's got what they want, and you'll still be getting your 97% reimbursement.
Over 15 years.
Over 15 years.
Yeah, so.
177 million.
To refine it. This year, for being our lid now, we'll have a $50 million deficit. That's going to drive your numbers. In the current year, 25-26, we'll have an $80 million deficit. That's going to drive your numbers down another $80 million. By our projections at the end of our 4-year plan, we'll just be at the mandated unassigned fund balance of $48 million. So, two things, and I do appreciate your comments. Two things. We intentionally and purposely built up that fund balance just so that we're prepared for the period we're coming in, a dramatic right sizing. We're going to be closing 2 schools. We're going to be cutting staff by 100 just next year, and then an additional 100. Only through those actions and other cost cutting will we be able to maintain that minimum fund balance.
But what I'm going to get at, let me interrupt you here. But you got 424 million. I would have to think that you've assigned some of that fund balance towards some of those obligations or costs or expenditures that leave you with 177 million.
You're right. We have. You always got to assign the next year's deficit. So there's 80 million goes right away. And another 50 million.
So that wouldn't affect the 177?
Yes, it will.
In what respect?
The total amount of fund balance is going to go down to $130 million. So it's not 400 anymore. At the end of this year, it's going to be 270. So, with that in mind, sound financial management, assuming you borrow your funds to pay for your contractors, and because our debt, our projects are 97% aidable, when we have to start paying off the debt, our building aid will go up almost dollar for dollar. So it's like cash free for the district, and you're not touching those cash reserves. It's the recommended, tried and true method suggested by New York State to fund your capital project. We just finished our July cash flow projection, the combined one for the city and the school board. You do not want us taking $20 million more out of our cash for that combined analysis. You really don't. our cash is already gonna drop 90 million this year because of the deficit and timing of some of our grant reimbursements. It would be a much riskier alternative than simply excluding the aidable projects from the debt. In fact,
You know, maybe because I'm operating from an unknown variable that I don't know, you know, from the 424 to the 177, the assigned, that there's $247 million, and I don't have a breakdown of what those assigned expenses are. Okay, so I was assuming that perhaps some of the assignments are based on what you're saying about setting aside funds for potential deficits or whatever. Okay, not the unassigned. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what the 247 million is that you guys already committed to. Okay.
Jeanette,
Okay.
thank you.
So getting back to just the proposed bond anticipation note, the ban itself is proposed at $29,433,750. It includes all district projects. Those are 21 projects with approved bond resolutions totaling $21,950,000. There are 3 city projects included that are in that reimbursable bucket of totaling $7,483,000. The federal reimbursement for these particular projects is 95%, with the city portion being 5%. There's no city projects included from that recurring annual request that we spoke about at this table. Next one. The power amount again, $29.4 million. Structure is estimating that total bond and proceeds will be $29,829,340. It will be tax exempt. As it's a ban, it matures in 1 year. In 1 year, the city controller's office will make a determination if they're going to roll it over into another ban or if they would sell a bond at that point for those districts.
Why is that will be a ban instead of a bond? The school board's piece?
I think the thought process was just, roll it all as a ban and then see how the projects progress in the next year, and then then just sell what we actually needed. If the full amount was actually what we needed, then we would just sell that when it was completed. And then, once you sell the bond, like if you reband it next year, you could kind of line it up with what the schedule was. If we were back on the normal April schedule or May or, at that point in time.
By not doing a bond now, we will be incurring closing costs twice for those projects.
Yeah, I mean, the closing costs are a lot less expensive than a bond, because we're using, we're not doing a bond rating, which is substantially more than, I don't know what the actual cost.
Yeah, so I mean, I think.
Well, the note's got to be rated.
I think it's rated SP1+, which is the highest short-term rating by S&P. I think the thought, and
Who's the bond insurer?
no insurance, it's S&P rated short-term note.
So without insurance?
No insurance. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the thought process is the bond anticipation notes are a fairly common instrument used by municipalities. The thought process is you long-term finance the project once it's completed, so you kind of know what the final costs are of the project. I think we're in an interest rate environment where we have a very short 5-year curve, pretty flat, and then it steepens quite a bit after 5 years. I think when you look at the bond versus ban analysis, it became clear that short-term notes, given where the rates are, proved to be beneficial. Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball to see where rates are going to be down the road, but knowing that the Fed is kind of building in significant rate cuts over the next year or so, we would think in theory that long-term rates would at some point start to come down as opposed to going the other way.
And I think the question we had was, are these projects really ready to go? We went to the market a number of times on projects and the money has been sitting. The city has been paying interest over the next year, so we'll see the
we need to flip a ban, or do we need a bond? Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Jeanette?
Yes. The estimated cost of issuance for the ban is $50,000 plus underwriter's discount of about $22,000 for roughly $72,000 of issuance costs. Estimated interest at this time, based on the preceding outline, for the ban is just under $804,000 for the year.
When was this analysis done, Rich?
August 25th?
Okay, so the numbers haven't adjusted since August 25th?
No, I mean, the general long-term rates have come down pretty good over the last couple of weeks.
I didn't know how up to date this was. I don't
The
know.
one-year note is pretty comparable to where we were, a week or so ago.
So, next slide, Nathan, thank you. With respect to our comments and recommendations on the review, as Director Keenan noted, selling a ban before bond does incur additional costs, of course. To kind of gauge what we're looking at, approximately $100,000 of cost of issuance are incurred for a bond sale versus $50,000 for this ban sale. The underwriter's discount is a lot less for the ban. It's 0.075% of par. For the last sale that was made for a bond, it was 0.15 of par. So that is something to consider going forward, is that there will be additional issuance costs. Next slide. Importantly, by shifting these projects down the road, the total amount of authorized and unissued debt and budgeted but unauthorized projects, so these are either projects that have a bond resolution and are ready to be sold, or have not yet been able to have a bond resolution approved, increases to $96.2 million. These are all projects on the back burner that need to be considered by the mayor's administration when developing the capital budget and the 5-year capital improvement plan, also in line with the limited debt capacity in determining how much financing to request. Last slide.
Can I just weigh in there a little bit?
Yes.
I mean, I would recommend that the common council, along with the mayor's office, review this $90+ million for rescission, and review all the projects that aren't going to be built, or about, have lost their prioritization. So I think it would be appropriate on the part of the administration and the council to rescind all those outstanding bond resolutions on projects that don't believe that would get issued. That's the recommendation.
I agree. I think that's something that has to be taken into consideration as.
Get that off our books.
Yep. Anything that isn't a priority anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And then future bond sales, of course, will need to be determined based on the financial and economic conditions at the time, but we strongly recommend that the bond sale in the future coincide with the construction season. Also, it's not only, well, it allows for the most effective use of public funds by allowing Public Works or whatever organization it is dig into those funds and be able to use them right away instead of paying interest on funds that are sitting in a bank account. Secondly, it supports the spend down requirement that 85% of a bond be expended within the first 3 years. To support all of these initiatives, we recommend that the district also develop and submit a 5-year capital improvement program to supplement the city's capital improvement program. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. That summarizes our comments from our report.
I think listening to everybody here and all of the discussions that we've had today leads us to a period, I think, of confusion that we've seen on a number of different levels, and that I'm hoping that the control board can start to help all of the parties here move to a process that I think has fundamentally changed over the last few years, specifically with the school district not borrowing for a number of years, so that we've had structural changes in how we need to think about everything. I think, Andy, you brought up a good point. If the initial bond levels were meant to reduce our bond indebtedness because we didn't have a credit rating, is that the appropriate level at this point in time? What I'm concerned about, and I'll apologize for being the economist in the room, is what I'm concerned about is, yes, we have debt service, but that has to be balanced with, if we don't do these projects, what will the cost be? So if we don't put a roof on and we lose an entire building because we didn't bond, we need to start to think in a little bit of a different way and ask the question of, what's the optimal amount of debt that the city needs? What are the projects that they need? And also, I think that what we have, but we haven't used appropriately, is we have the school districts bonding, we have the cities bonding, but we also have, for example, short-term projects that we know that we're going to need to do every few years. So we're going to have to buy snowplows every few years. We're going to have to buy police cars every few years. We're going to have to put roofs on buildings every whatever numbers of years those are. Well, we need a schedule, and I'm sure there is one in the background, but we need that as part of this whole discussion to be able to sit down and say, okay, we have a plan that the comptroller can be comfortable with, that the city can be comfortable with, that the school district can be comfortable with, because we know where we're going and we're not doing this piecemeal. Now, I'm not going to blame anybody for what's happening over this year, because we had COVID and COVID dollars coming in. We had the school district coming off of its state borrowing plan, and it's being able to use resources through refunding to be able to do this. And this all sort of happened in one giant storm. But maybe that will allow us to be able to sit down and rethink some of this and talk out all the different parts. We have a lot of expertise on this board that has done a lot of this work in the past, both on the staff and as directors. And I think that along with the controller's staff, along with the city and the school district, we should start to sit down and maybe have some meetings going forward to talk a lot of this out, so we're not here next year talking about the same thing. We've already said we want to make sure that money's spent. Maybe we need to move when these bond resolutions are done and when the borrowing is done, so that the money is there at the appropriate time and we're not waiting. I'm very concerned that if this money doesn't come in till October or November, how many projects are we going to wait till next, April or May to be able to start, because they were legitimate projects, but because of the timing, we have sort of missed the deadlines. So there are a lot of moving parts here, and I think there's a lot of things to consider that we need to maybe bring all of us back into this room and start to talk about, and maybe we can put together a process to move ourselves forward so things will work out a lot better for the city.
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the items of discussion that was completely overlooked right now is the fact that there is still over $20 million of unexpended bond proceeds. All right? So I'm a little bit concerned that, does the city have the capacity to still initiate and, go through these projects when they still have $20 million that they haven't spent yet, that taxpayers are paying the debt service on? So if you're going to issue, and this is part of a larger landscape relative to administration, the controller's office, the council, the lawsuit, this, to me, to issue $110 million, and I'm not going to get into the legal side of things, but why would you be borrowing an excessive amount of money at the expense of taxpayers in probably the fourth or fifth most poverty-stricken city in this country if you can't even process the outstanding bond funds you have for these other projects? So, you know, that is a perspective I'm offering. I'm not taking sides anywhere. I'm just saying that we have to keep the debt issuance to a reasonable level, because I don't know if the city has the capacity to process all those outstanding bond funds for those projects. So, I mean, that's just a thought. I mean, again,
I think
$20 million in outstanding bonds that people are paying for, and the projects aren't getting done. And then you're going to issue another, you know, 20, 30, 50, or however it ends up. Again, with the inability to actually complete the project. So I just wanted to bring that up because it was part of the report that, again, there's $20 million of bonds out there that they haven't, you know, finished the projects or started the projects or whatever. So
and I think
that's what I wanted to bring.
And I think that's got to be part of this process as we bring it all together and try to work on everything. It's how do we make sure there's an efficient way of either reallocating those monies to projects that can get done, or making sure that the projects that needed to get done got done, as we figure out what the best and optimal bond level is.
Yeah, and this isn't blaming the city or anybody, but, you know, there's layoffs, there's retirements, there's, you know, people that, you know, aren't in the position to take on the largesse of all these capital bonds. So that's what you know, that's what I'm thinking is that, you know, it's not about not wanting to borrow the money, it's about the ability to spend it. And taxpayers are eating the bill. That's all I have to say.
Selena?
Piggyback off what Andrew said. At the $20 million that projects, the bond proceeds that still sitting, but overall, like $275 million in projects, funding that's sitting out there that need to be spent. And also, as stated by the rating agencies, if you look at the outlook for the city of Buffalo, we are just trying, and not to make this political or anything, it's more trying to be from a fiscally responsible. We can't continue to take on debt. We also have to have the ability to pay that debt. If you look at the debt payments for this current year, fiscal year 26, debt payments $36 million. Last year, another $36 million. The year prior was around $27 million. Yeah, almost like 70-75% of the city of Buffalo budgeted cost is fixed or contractual. We have a number of unions, almost 5 or 6 unions that's out of contracts that haven't expired. From an operational standpoint, will the city be able to incur and pay debt? Our job is to do analysis on what the city can and can't do. And as Andy said, the controller is not saying she don't want to go to the market for whatever what was passed by administration and common council. Just the ability for the city to be able to pay, not just debt, but also to pay for the cost of doing business, to pay the employees, to pay for supplies. We don't have the revenue to cover the expense. At some point, we keep borrowing, somebody's going to have to pay that debt. So we're just saying, we can have a discussion. She's not closing the door, but we had a discussion on how do we resolve it.
And my other point is, we're being confronted on an operating budget deficit between $40 and $70 million. It's not like they have some surplus that they can rely on as in previous years. So we still have to deal with the ability to come up with a plan that will keep the city functioning. And so, you know, like I said, notwithstanding, you know, we still have an operating budget problem that has to be resolved. And they got 9 months to do it. And I don't know how they can. And, you know, given the fact that we're getting involved involved in a landscape between City Hall that has overlooked the fact that no one's been talking about how they're going to close the rest of the $40 or $70 million. So let's keep things in that kind of perspective too.
Regarding the operating budget, just to be clear, we do have our capital debt payment budgeted in the general fund. I think it's 36.2 million, for fiscal 26. And that, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, that is, an allocation for the full amount that those, bond resolutions were drafted for, correct?
Yeah, when the budget was prepared, I had to provide a number, and I, did a conservative number, and I plugged that in based on a bond, not on a ban either. So, I mean, I had to provide a number.
Yeah. So the operating budget, I mean, we do have that appropriated in the general fund to make the bond payment.
It's just 1 year though.
That was just for the one, yes.
To make the bond payment.
Yeah.
How you gonna pay for the police and fire department?
Well, that was also.
Whitney, can you come in? You've been very patient here, and we asked you to come in. Can you shed any light or make any recommendations?
I mean, I would generally, well, I mean, I guess I'd start with, are there any specific questions for me? I mean, I generally would stay out of kind of the political side of things, obviously, but, from a rate perspective, I can speak to that. I think that some of the comments about the kind of the borrowing all track, I know I've had a chance to speak with Jeanette prior to this call, and kind of weigh in with some of my thoughts, from my perspective, a ban is, not a bad way to go. Certainly you are taking some risk, some rollover risk, a year from now that rates may rise. As someone mentioned, we don't know where rates are going to go in the future, but indications are at least that they'll probably go lower, or hold steady. So I think that capturing the value in a ban right now makes sense. And then I think there was one comment, that you may incur additional costs by issuing the ban this year, and then reissuing as bonds next year. I think that can be somewhat mitigated if you go. I mean, the city is typically, from my understanding, issued on an annual basis. So if you were going back to the market, you could just upsize the issuance to capture the bans as well, and mitigate some of those extra cost of issuance that might otherwise be there if you weren't issuing. Just to shed a little bit more light on some feedback I got from our pricing desk. I think the negative outlook will have a small pricing implication. I think but largely unlikely to go above 5 basis points. So that's a relatively small impact on pricing. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Can I ask you our traditional annual question, which is how much money would we save if the control board borrowed the money instead of the city?
Yeah, absolutely. So having spoken with our pricing group, they estimate that it would be, well, that BFSA would price a ban around 10 to 12 basis points tighter than the city. That's before any impacts of the negative outlook, which they estimate to be between 0 and 5 basis points. That's not, that doesn't take into account the fact that, BFSA isn't rated, so we're just assuming they maintain the current ratings and current outlook level. But estimating that that's between 12 and 17 basis points, I think that was, let me just pull that up. It was around, it would have about a $30,000 to $50,000 impact, depending on how, if it was 12 basis points, sorry, $35,000 to $50,000, 12 to 17 basis points on $29 million of debt.
Does that include your fee?
So exactly. So it does not. And, I think that BFSA would have other costs if they were, on top of the city's costs, if it was issuing through the authority. So, so the additional financial advisor, additional any additional legal costs, those would eat into that. So I think from that point of view, I don't know that, there's real value in going through the authority. I think that would largely be more felt if it was a larger issuance, more of a long-term borrowing where the benefit of the authority's credit, that 10 to 12 or potentially 10 to 15 basis points, has an impact that's not just felt over 1 year of interest. It's a much, if it's a 20-year borrowing, that makes a much bigger difference.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Whitney? Thank you, Whitney.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah, I had just one question going back to the recommended debt limit, mainly because I think the question being confronted here, I think is a particularly important question of what amount of debt can the city reasonably afford. I think that is a very important question. The thing I still do not understand, and I have not been able to see it in any of the comptroller's documents nor in the explanation today, is exactly how they arrive at these recommended debt limit numbers. I've heard several times that various metrics are utilized to help determine, and I know those metrics are roughly outlined in the debt management policy. But where's the math that gets you to 28 million, 28 million, 29 million, 29 million, 34, and 36 million?
I mean, we plug in the outstanding numbers. Obviously, I think you're right. We have to determine how much the city can afford. So we plug in each year and we see what that looks like going out. So we would have to know, what's the need? Is the need $100 million every year? Is that the need for the city? So that we would have to plug that in and see where that goes with those ratios. Obviously we're in a good position if you look at the estimate report on those ratios. But I think the goal was to kind of gradually go up, not to go up leaps and bounds, because that affects the general fund, as we're all talking about.
But shouldn't the limit be the maximum? It should show a range. It should be literally by the numbers, the maximum they can do. Not to say that anyone is looking to always go to the maximum. But isn't that the point of the limit, is the maximum? So that should be something particularly quantifiable. And based on your explanation, I'm not getting that actual numbers are being computed to get to this number. This seems to be more anecdotal. And a lot of the crux of the conversation here is really predicated on these numbers being some hard and fast line in the sand. And if they are a hard and fast line in the sand, we should be able to see the math on how you get there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think going back to my statement of let us sit down and try to work through all of this in this sort of new world, that some of these things can be discussed and we can start to come to some consensus so people feel comfortable with all of this. I think there are a lot of smart people in this room who can work together for the betterment of the city if we do that.
And I think just to speak to what Mark was saying, it's a process. We'll go over that process. This has been a process for years. This is how we got to where we're at. Now it's being questioned because we want to go above the cap that's been followed by the past 20, 25 years. There's never been a question from the county or anyone else in regards to how we came up with our cap.
Okay, but there's a question right now. So then,
and we will address that question.
Let me just piggyback on what Mark said. So now, based on whatever formula or ratios or criteria you guys develop, I was under the assumption, or maybe we all are under the assumption, that those numbers quantify a max of what you guys think you're allowed to sell. And I'm just, like I said, you guys developed the numbers. He repeated them. I was under, we assume that based on your calculations, that is the maximum dollar amount that we have the ability to issue. You say that that's not true?
I mean, I think we put in the ratios and we try to be in a range on all those three criteria. Like, I mean, I could go back and, we can discuss what we need to provide to show how we come up with the numbers. And then going forward, whether that's the correct way, but that's the way, as Delano said, that we've been doing it for the past, 10 years.
At the risk of repeating myself, I keep asking, what is the impact of the availability of the reimbursable amounts on that calculation? Because frankly, I don't care if it's 28 million or 110 million, if it has the same impact bottom line to the city budget. So, if you're going to get reimbursed, I would think that would have a major impact on your calculation of what the maximum amount that can be borrowed is. And I haven't heard that that's the case.
But then I would say, we don't know if the project's gonna be reimbursed at the time that we submit this report. And
So how would you determine?
We wouldn't know. That's why I say we may consider adjusting the cap once we figure out if the project is reimbursed or not.
But you're being told that it is.
I mean, I think we had enough, proof for at least $57 million worth of projects that were bondable. I know most of those reimbursable amounts, I mean, bond resolutions were not drafted because of the requested information. And I personally don't know all that, but just to go back to the debt capacity for the city, we're about only like 77% of our maximum.
The legal debt.
Yes, the legal.
Yeah, but I'm talking more.
It's also about affordability.
Affordability.
Right.
Yeah, you can't afford
Our legal debt limit is.
Legal,
Different question.
legal debt limit is one thing, affordability is the other.
Terrifying to get anywhere near.
And I'm saying affordability.
Right. So that's not what we're talking about. But yes,
I'm with you there.
the controller's cap is something that is advisory. The council can and did vote above that for the first time in many years. So I think one of the crux arguments also is what's the controller's authority when it comes to that point, right? And so
And I'm saying the affordability is impacted on the availability of
Correct.
these other funds.
Right.
So if, what needs to be done for your office to convince the controller's office that these are indeed reimbursable? You have to have signed grants, you have to have, what's the evidence that you need, and are you not able to provide it, or are you able to provide it, and what is acceptable to you?
And just, I'm sorry, but again, what guarantees do we have of the reimbursability of any of these projects? Now, I remember when we were issuing bonds, there was never any discussion of any bond project being reimbursable. Now we're talking about reimbursable, which I believe should be included in some respect, that it add on to the final number. But at the same time, I don't know what guarantees we're getting from the federal government, the state government, or whatever agencies have committed to contracts, terms and conditions, or whatever is necessary in order to get that reimbursement, especially in discussions that are going on in Washington, D.C. right now. I don't know if there's any guarantees, believe it or not, but that's my opinion based on the environment we're living in.
Yeah, so based on those grants, I mean, there's normally commitment letters where state certain milestones that we have to meet when it comes to the project. We'd have to analyze each project to make sure.
Specifically, commitment letters from what agency?
Correct, yeah.
We know, I mean, give me.
Yeah, so some are state, I mean, like, so.
So in other words, like the three projects we're talking about right now, right?
Yeah.
That we're getting reimbursed from, what, are they separate agencies from the federal government?
Those are all federally.
They're all federal, what agency of the federal government?
I'd have to.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't
I
want.
mean, that's what I don't know, or we don't know,
Okay.
the specifics of whether or not we can rely upon those funds being reimbursed.
But then we're gonna need to have some kind of process that says that when something is met, that it goes forward. We can't change from project to project saying, I think this project might be reimbursable. I don't know about that project over here. So we need to have a policy that says when we hit a certain level of thresholds, right, I understand what you're saying, but we need to have, and I think that that's what's changed. 20 years ago, when the policy was started that we're using right now, we didn't have all of these reimbursables. We didn't have all of these things in place in the same way that we do today. And has our policy been updated enough so that we have a logical policy that's good for the city of Buffalo? That's my real concern as we go through it. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you on a previous point. Like, the city needs to develop a comprehensive capital plan. It includes, you know, whether they're going to use cash, whether it's grant funded, and whether some of these things are bond funded. And then you can figure out like what the financing mechanism for those needs are. And we don't have that now. There was no mention of any of these projects in last year's capital plan or four-year capital plan after that. I think that was one of the other issues. You know, I think a larger plan instead of, you know, just identifying those one-year needs is what is, you know, if the city said, well, we have all these needs, like, how are we going to finance them? Like you said, get in the room, figure out, like, well, can we get grants for some of these things? Can we cash finance them? You know, some of the smaller things. You know, I think that's what needs to happen.
So do you know for next year, as the comptroller's office, do you have an idea of what you just said at all?
Well, based on last year's five-year
plan,
national plan, they didn't identify.
The 5-year plan that was approved by the council.
So we can talk about, I know the mayor is on the line. Chris, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. I just wanted to address a couple of things. You know, it was stated that this is the way it's always been done. I think that's part of the problem, the way things have always been done. This year with this capital budget, we got creative. We couldn't do things the way they've always been done because the schools can't borrow on their own. They've used the Joint Schools Construction Board, so we had to get creative. There was also discussion that there was never any mention of reimbursables with relation to this capital budget. That was the whole basis of exceeding the cap, was the fact that these were reimbursed, both the city's projects and then the schools at the 97% where they would cover the difference. That was the whole basis of exceeding the cap. And I think there's also some discussions, there were issues that are being conflated. You know, there's talk about there's mentions of the lawsuit, there's mentions of other things, but the difference is, what are we prepared and ready to do? What would be prudent to do? And those are conversations we can have, but those are decisions that are made by the Common Council versus what the controller has the authority to do. When you're talking, and I've heard several people talk about the $20 million in outstanding bonds that haven't been, the projects that haven't been completed, makes perfectly good sense. If we have projects that aren't ready to go, I don't think we should bond out for them either. But to categorically say that they're not going to bond out to exceed an arbitrary cap, which it was talked about earlier, was based on need. It's not based on need, because if it was based on need, it'd be hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it's road infrastructure, building infrastructure, whatever it might be. It's certainly not just based on need, because it would be exceptionally higher. And but I understand that, the conversations are taking place talking about the lawsuit, but they're two very different subjects. What the controller is legally allowed to do and what we are prepared to administer as far as what projects and we're prepared to implement right away. And those are conversations I'm perfectly open to having. And they need to be part of the conversation, because I don't want to bond out for anything and have projects sitting there waiting to happen for years and have the taxpayers pay the interest while it sits there. That's what's happened in the past, and it's not something I want to do with this year's capital budget. But again, I think the two issues are being conflated. And the fact that it's mentioned that this is the way it was done, I think that's part of the problem.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, I think from this control board standpoint, we're not saying anything about the lawsuit and not taking a position on that one way or another. I think we are interested, Chris, on doing exactly what you said, which is trying to help all of the parties move forward in a path that's going to be helpful to the city. Are there any other discussions or questions? If not, I think, is there anybody online that sent a comment or a question? Then may I have a motion to approve the analysis and findings and recommendations as provided by the BFSA staff?
So moved.
Second? Second? Okay. Any further questions or discussions on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay. The motion passes. This concludes.
Fred, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I voted in the negative.
Okay. Who? Chris? Thank you, Chris. Okay. So, noted. This concludes the meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Chris, are you still there?
Oh, yeah.
How you adjusting at home without Jack?
A little quieter, but
When,
Brooks played football now.
always he.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for him. Yeah, when